might you incorporate fixed index annuities into your portfolio? Well, here to talk with me about that is Robert Klein from the Retirement Income Center. Robert, welcome.
Thank you, Bob.
So a lot of folks may have heard about fixed index annuities, but may not be familiar with them. Do you want to start with a description?
Okay, yeah, a fixed index annuity, sometimes called a FIA, is a fixed annuity that offers a minimum guaranteed interest rate, plus the potential for higher earnings based on the performance of one or more stock market indexes. And included sometimes in a fixed indexed annuity is a lifetime benefit feature that's either offered through a built-in guaranteed withdrawal benefit, minimum guaranteed withdrawal benefit, or an optional lifetime income rider.
Okay. And there are what, two types of FIAs?
There's single premium FIAs, which that's pretty obvious. You have a one-time premium or a flexible premium FIA where you can, after the initial premium, continue to add to it, subject to limitations of individual carriers as far as the amounts.
Right. And when you're investing in a FIA, you have the opportunity to invest both in a fixed account as well as the account that has the index tied to it. Is that right?
Yeah, there's always a fixed account that typically has a minimum guaranteed interest rate of 1% to 2%. And then the main reason for investing in fixed indexed annuities is for the indexing strategies. And you can typically change your allocations once a year into those strategies.
There's been a good deal of innovation in terms of the indexes that are used in FIAs, but the most common one is what, the S&P 500?
That is the most common, and the most common version of that is what's called a one-year index, where they measure the performance each contract year, although you can have two or more measurement years as well.
Right. And then, like many annuities, there's surrender charges associated with FIAs?
Yeah, the ones on FIAs are a little bit higher. They're declining surrender charges that typically are between 5 and 10 years. And FIAs are basically, they're meant to be held for the long term, and surrender charges help the insurance carrier recoup their costs associated with the fixed index annuities. And the fixed index annuities, most of them offer a free withdrawal provision of up to 10% that kicks in either during the first year, a lot of them do, or the second year.
Right. And then in terms of, I think when I think about fixed index annuities, I think folks need to become better acquainted with the caps associated with these. So my understanding with these is that losses are eliminated and positive returns are limited with the fixed index annuity.
Yeah, you have, there's two basic differences when you allocate funds to an indexing strategies. One is if the index's return is negative, there's no loss gets posted to your account. That's sometimes referred to as the power of zero. You don't participate in losses. And when the index's return is positive, like you were saying, Bob, it's often capped at a percentage. These days, it tends to be 4%, can be a little bit higher, but it is capped. And so, but the main feature, once again, is you do not participate in losses as you would if you invested directly in the index.
All right. So can you walk us through maybe a strategy, indexing strategy?
Yeah, let me do that here. This is a pretty simple example comparing if you invest in a fixed indexed annuity versus a direct investment in an index, a stock market index. With a fixed indexed annuity, here are 3 years, the first 3 years where the actual returns are 3%, 9%, and negative 12% respectively. With the fixed indexed annuity, the credited return, assuming you have a cap rate of 3%, and this is for an investment of 100,000. If the actual return is 3%, you're fine. You're within the cap rate, so you get credited with $3,000 So at the end of the year, you're up to 103,000. Year two, the actual return is 9%. However, you're limited by the 4% cap. So you're credited with 4% of 103,000. So your value is 107. So here's where it gets interesting. Year three, the return of the index is a negative 12%. You're credited with 0%. Anytime there's losses, there's no impact on your fixed index annuity as far as the loss. You're simply credited with no return. So you maintain your value. You lock that in at 107,000. The difference would be if you invested directly in the index itself and you have the same returns, 3.9 minus 12. Year one, you have the same result, 3%, you're at 103,000. Year two, with a 9% return, you're credited for that full 9%, you're at 112,000. Year three, with a loss of 12%, you're hit with that loss, so you're down to 99,000. So here's where it becomes obvious what the value is of a fixed indexed annuity. You're at 99,000 versus 107,000 had you invested directly in the fixed indexed annuity.
So this ability to shelter gains from subsequent losses, that's a big feature of FIAs.
That is the main attraction. And in a situation where we are now, where the stock market has been going up every year for so many years, it's a real nice defensive strategy to think about employing in a portfolio.
So Bob, you have another example of how a FIA works with respect to the S&P 500?
Yeah, I do. And so let's talk about the assumptions that are used in this example. It's a more comprehensive example. First, we have an investment of $1 million at age 65, annual withdrawals of 50,000 from 65 to 90, annual rates of return per the return column, which you'll see shortly. And we're using, there's S&P 500 1-year point-to-point strategy with a cap of 4% and a 7-year declining surrender charge schedule. And we have built into this free annual withdrawals of 10% of the contract value during the first 7 years. So let me bring up the example here. So on the left-hand side, we have S&P 500 index, right-hand side, fixed indexed annuity, S&P 500 indexing strategy. And this is a situation where we have losses in the first 3 years. So this could be, if you're 65 and retiring, this is the term for this is sequence of returns, where you have negative returns the first few years of retirement. So with your traditional portfolio, the S&P 500, that's pretty damaging. It brings your beginning value of $1 million down to 574,000 after the first 3 years of returns of -18, -12, -3. If you flip over to the fixed indexed annuity side here, this is where the fixed indexed annuity shines based on the S&P 500 indexing strategy being used. We're taking out, the same withdrawals, 50,000 a year. And then because we don't participate in the losses, we're simply credited with 0 each year. This is what I was referring to earlier as the power of 0. So we maintain the value to the extent we have, the beginning balance of $1 million, it's reduced by the withdrawals. So at the end of the first 3 years, we're at 850 versus 573. So if this situation were to occur in real life, we would be ahead by 276,000 by using the fixed indexed annuity. As time proceeds, you'll see that even though going forward, we have some, really nice returns, 16%, 8%, 5%, et cetera. And if you have the S&P 500 index, you're credited with 100% of those returns versus the fixed indexed annuity, you're capped at the 4% rate of return. So in all these years where it's above 4%, you're credited with just 4%. So as an example, with the index in this year, you have a 16% return, you're credited with $84,000 of earnings versus only 32 in the fixed index annuity. And there's only 1 year, I believe, where the return was at or below the positive return. Yeah, right here, 3% at age 74, where the amount of earnings that were credited are at the full 3% of the value. So what happens because of this, what I call bad return start that we had here, that affects the portfolio value for the duration here. So in the S&P 500 index situation with the direct investment, eventually we get down to a situation, if we keep doing the withdrawals of 50,000 a year, we're at age 87, excuse me, we're down to 14,000, and then the portfolio is depleted in the subsequent year. Whereas the fixed indexed annuity, even though the earnings in most year were limited by the cap significantly, we still maintain the account. It stays in place and we don't deplete the fixed indexed annuity. And we're able to take out withdrawals totaling 1.3 million versus under 1.2 with the straight S&P 500 index investment. And if you just simply look at the additional value column, year over year, there's at worst case scenario in the last year, this strategy, there's $85,000 of additional value. But in most years, you could see it's 132,000 to 276,000 of additional value with a fixed indexed annuity. So the lesson here, for a lot of people looking at fixed indexed annuities, they focus on these cap rates and they compare them to traditional investments. And so sometimes they get turned off by the cap rates. But when they look at an example like this and they put themselves in the position, hey, I'm retiring, the direct investment in the S&P 500 index, that made sense before, but now I'm retired. I can't afford to absorb these potential large losses, especially when we've had so many years behind us where we've had a lot of gains and we have a lot of potential now for these types of losses. I'd rather play it safe with a portion of my money anyway.
So that's a great example. If you don't mind, keep that screen up for a second, because
Sure.
One question I have is regarding using a FIA withdrawal strategy like you have here, instead of saying a 4% withdrawal strategy, where on the left-hand side, the risk is seemingly obvious. You have an ending value of 0 by the time you get to age 88, and an ending value far greater at the same age. In fact, you have a positive value at age 90. So would you recommend this versus, say, a 4% withdrawal strategy?
I'm not a big fan of 4% withdrawal strategy, Bob. I think it's a nice general rule to use. And this is kind of, this example here on the left and the right ignores the fact that, the 50,000 withdrawals, depending upon your other resources, may need to be increased each year for inflation. But this could work 50,000 a year if you have other income sources to draw upon.
Right. And then in terms of incorporating the use of a fixed index annuity with, say, a reverse mortgage, any thoughts about how to blend those two strategies?
That's a great question. Great question. They both have a similar approach insofar as they're both defensive kinds of strategies to protect against downsides with the market. So there's just a tremendous amount of creativity and opportunity to structure if you have a reverse mortgage and also FIAs, depending upon how much of a reverse mortgage credit line you have going and how much you want to have into fixed indexed annuities, as well as your overall portfolio, how that looks. But to the extent you can get both of those in place, that's like an ideal protection strategy to use throughout retirement.
Right. And then when I think about FIAs, I think about them in the context of other similar products, tools. At one end, the safe end maybe being a fixed annuity, FIA being next, a registered index-linked annuity, or RILA being next, and then a variable annuity being perhaps the riskier of those four options. Any thoughts about, is that sort of the correct spectrum to cast the FIA in?
Yeah, and the other thing you have going for you with the FIA, we didn't talk about it other than in the beginning, you have the opportunity to have lifetime income either built in, or generally it's more readily available through an income rider. So that is another way to go with this. I'm approaching this this morning, Bob, through strictly using the fixed indexed annuity itself without the income rider as an defensive strategy against stock market losses. However, it can be more heavily leveraged, if you will, if to the extent that you have an income rider built into it.
Right. And for folks looking to purchase a fixed index annuity, any thoughts about the rating of the company that they should be looking at, or any other factors that should be weighed when they're looking at this?
As with all life insurance products, especially including annuities, the ratings of the company are extremely important. You should only work with carriers that are highly rated. It's even whether you have a life insurance policy or a fixed index annuity like this, that you intend to have for many, many years, that just ups the game in terms of evaluating these life insurance carriers very closely to make sure they're going to be there for the long run.
All right. Well, we've covered a lot of ground, Robert. Anything that we missed, or anything that just bears reemphasizing?
Other than the fact that the timing of this presentation in the context of what the market has done, I think people are just spoiled, quite frankly, about with the returns that we've enjoyed over the last 12 or so years. And so my opinion is you need to really seriously take a look at this and employ it where it makes sense.
Well, thanks as always, Robert, for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with our viewers and readers. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Bob. Always my pleasure.